Welcome back to Weekly Improvements. In this episode, I'll be servicing my Fox Float X2 shock. Before we start disassembling, we first need the right tools. Basic requirements include an Allen key set, a vise with aluminum jaws, etc. Now for the special tools. My X2 shock is from 2022. To find the right tool for your X2 shock, you need to go to the RideFox website and enter your shock number. I've divided it into 3 categories. The first is fluids, oils, and seals. I ordered the matching seal kit from Racing Bros, as they seem to have better and more durable seals. After that, you'll need Fox 4 WT oil, preferably the whole liter, because you'll definitely spill a lot of oil at the beginning. To lubricate the seals, I also use SRAM butter or Fox Slick honey oil. You should use the appropriate grease. I also have Loctite and brake cleaner. I also have a sealable jam jar to catch the old oil. Now for the next category, the actual tools. To avoid spending hundreds of dollars, I recommend buying the tools from Amazon. With a little research, you can find the right tool in a complete set. My set included the appropriate fixtures to securely clamp the shock in a vise. I also included a hook wrench for the bearing unit. However, I recommend the Park Tool HCW 5 hook wrench, as it has no chamfers or rounded edges, which helps prevent it from slipping out of the groove. Of course, you need a shock pump with the appropriate attachment for the second air chamber. And then the $60 Fox tool to bleed the shock. The best way to make the right tool is with a hose and a syringe, which worked great for me in the end. And O-ring wrenches are also very helpful. The last category is personal protective equipment, rubber gloves, and safety goggles. The first step for the shock service is to release the air from the shock. The air pressure should be released slowly. Note the air pressure so you know how much to pump back in later. It's important that all the air is released. Ideally, you should unscrew the valve core. Next, I remove the retaining ring. I use an O-ring pick to do this. First, I pry one end out of the groove. Then I turn the retaining ring further and pry the other end out of the groove. Now I can push the air sleeve down, then remove the volume spacers. Now the shock is clamped in a vise on the eyelet side. To protect the stanchions, I wrap duct tape around it and loosen the bearing assembly. As mentioned before, I recommend the Park Tool HCW-5 hook wrench. Now that we've removed the inner air sleeve from the shaft end eyelet, I'll clamp the inner air sleeve using the aluminum tools, being careful not to scratch anything. To remove the bearing assembly from the inner air sleeve, I'll use the Park Tool hook wrench again. It's important to clean the guide, the silver part, really well before clamping it in place. I use the other side of my aluminum tool and clamp the shock securely and tightly. To remove the shaft end eyelet, I simply use an Allen key. Release the IFP pressure by depressing the valve stem inside the reservoir end cap. Push the reservoir end cap into the reservoir to gain access to the wire retaining ring. To easily remove the retaining ring, simply press one side down and pull the ring out of the reservoir. I use the O-ring hook to lift the reservoir end cap out of the reservoir. Unthread the bleed screw and then drain the damper oil out over the jam jar. You can use the shaft eyelet to help you cycle the shock if needed. I clamp the body eyelet in my soft-jawed vise, then remove the travel spacers. Your shock might not have these. By unthreading and removing the 2 screws with a 2mm hex wrench. Next, I use the bearing housing driver to unthread the bearing assembly. After that, I remove the shaft assembly. I just read that you should leave the tool on when taking the shaft assembly out. Remove any negative volume spacers if present. Remove the bearing assembly by pulling it up off of the outer body. Remove the sag indicator O-ring. Now comes the fun part where I replace some of the seals. There are a lot of seals in the seal kit. Just look at that. I didn't include the seal replacement. It's best to refer to the official Fox manual, because the seals can vary from model year to model year. Now we need to fill the shock with oil and then bleed it. To do this, I fill the shock to the brim with 4 weight oil. Then I turn the compression screw and the rebound screw open and closed until no more air bubbles escape. Now, I take a rubber glove and put it over the outer body. By pressing the rubber glove in, I push the last air bubbles out of the system. I reinstall the shaft assembly into the outer body. By rolling it in like that, I make sure that I don't introduce any more air into the system. Then I tighten it with the bearing housing driver. I put a little SRAM butter on the IFP, then I reinstalled it into the reservoir with the bleed screw facing up. Again, making sure to not introduce any more air. Then I filled the syringe with 4 weight oil. I temporarily screwed the shaft eyelet back on to allow better compression of the shock. Then I bled the shock. Very important after bleeding the shock is to bring the IFP into position using a caliper. The IFP is pressed 1.140 inches deep into the reservoir. I close the bleed port again and put on a new rubber O-ring. I coated the reservoir end cap with a thin film of SRAM butter, then reinstalled it into the reservoir. Now I can push the end cap down, then reinstall the wire retaining ring. I used the fill adapter and the shock pump to fill the IFP with 150 psi of air. Fox recommends 100 psi, but I put in a little more because there is a little bit of air escaping when I remove the shock pump. Now the service is completed. The rest can be reassembled in reverse order. All I have to do now is install the shock on the bike and test ride it. If you have any questions, leave me a comment and like the video.